Once upon a time, in the rich brown dirt of a flower patch, a tiny seed cracked open. A thin green leaf tumbled out and a thirsty root dug into the soil. The miracle of life had begun. Aster grew toward the bright sun, its pleasant warmth soaking into his petals. Day by day, his long lavender petals grew bigger and bigger. "Careful," another flower warned. "You don't want to let those petals get out of control." Aster looked around and noticed something very odd. All the other flowers had very small petals and great big thorns growing up and down their stalks. "But the sun feels so good on my petals," Aster explained. "Why wouldn't I want to grow?" "You'll be sorry," replied the flower. As they spoke, dark clouds covered the sun. Shadows spread across the flower patch. Rain fell, wind blew, and the thin flower stalks rattled dryly against each other. "See?" asked the flower. But Aster did not see. And so he grew and grew and grew. His petals stretched out wider every day. The sun warmed them and made him feel oh so happy to be alive. Soon other flowers began to notice Aster's big petals. "You're blocking my sunlight," complained one. "Who do you think you are?" another asked. "Do you think you're better than us?" Some compared Aster's handsome petals to their own scrawny stalks and ugly thorns and got depressed. Some bristled their thorns menacingly. "You'll be sorry," they threatened. And the shadows came, and the rains fell, and the winds blew, and the flower stalks rattled dryly against each other. But Aster did not merely rattle. The wind caught his big petals and tossed him back and forth through the flower patch. His soft petals caught on the sharp thorns. Some were punctured and torn. Others ripped right off. "Ouch!" Aster cried. "You're hurting me." But there was nothing anyone could do to stop. When the rain stopped and the winds faded, Aster looked at himself. He looked terrible. He ached where his petals were torn away. He had no idea petals could hurt so much. "I tried to warn you," said the flower next to him. "That'll teach you not to show off," said another. Slowly, Aster began to regrow his petals. This time, however, the petals came out small. "I don't want to go through that again," he said to himself. Aster tried to enjoy the warm sunshine on his tiny petals, but they simply couldn't collect enough light, and he always felt cold. Time passed and one day Aster felt a curious urge. It felt strangely familiar and faintly delicious. A gentle pressure welled up deep inside his stalk and was trying to get out. Aster hadn't felt this pleasant sensation since he was just a young sprout. Suddenly Aster recognized the feeling. It was the urge to grow. The sweet desire to open his petals wide and stretch upward toward the sun. The instant Aster recognized the urge, he felt afraid. He remembered the terrible pain that petals cause when the wind blows. Aster didn't dare let his petals grow. He must fight to keep them small at all costs. As Aster fought to keep his petals from growing, he felt another strange pressure inside his stalk. He glanced down and noticed his thorns grow bigger and bigger. The growth had to go somewhere. Aster sighed. The thorns were ugly and uncomfortable, but what could he do? And the shadows came, and the rains fell, and the winds blew, and Aster didn't hurt this time. But when the clouds left and the sunshine returned, he didn't enjoy much either. The days all felt cold and boring. Aster looked around and realized that living in the flower patch wasn't nearly as happy as he once expected. Days blurred into weeks, weeks blurred into months, and months blurred into a continual grey twilight. Time passed, and one day Aster noticed something unusual. A small flower named Rose had sprouted next to him and was growing big, red petals. "Careful," Aster warned. "Those big petals will hurt you." "I think they feel wonderful," Rose said, spreading them even wider in the warm sunlight. Asta envied Rose and wanted so much to do the same. But the shadows would surely return, and then Asta wouldn't envy her at all. "Careful," warned another flower. "You'll be sorry," said others. But Rose paid no attention and continued basking joyfully in the warm sunlight. And the shadows came, and the rains fell, and the winds blew, and Rose's petals were ripped to shreds and torn away. "I tried to warn you," said a nearby flower as Rose whimpered in pain. "You should listen to your elders," said a very old, dry, shriveled flower who looked exactly like all the others. "I told you petals hurt," Asta said sympathetically. "Petals don't hurt," Rose shouted back with sudden energy. "Petals are soft, they keep me warm and make me beautiful. Only thorns hurt." Slowly, Rose began to regrow her petals. "You'll be sorry," tired old flowers whispered in dry, raspy voices. "You already are sorry," replied Rose. "You'll block my light," some complained. "You weren't using it anyway," Rose pointed out. "You'll make me feel bad about myself," others whined. "Then grow your own petals," Rose suggested. "Why can't you just fit in with the rest of us?" someone asked. "Why would I want to fit in with you?" Rose demanded. "You're all ugly and miserable and cold." Rose was right. Asta didn't want to feel miserable anymore. He didn't want to be ugly. He didn't want to feel cold. In fact, he couldn't even remember how it felt to be warm. That was the last straw. Asta couldn't stand it anymore. He decided to grow his petals back no matter the cost. It took some effort after so much time, but little by little, his petals spread out wider and wider. The other flowers issued their same old warnings and complaints, but this time, Asta paid no attention. "Hi," said Rose. "Thanks for joining me." "My pleasure," answered Asta. As the sunlight soaked into their petals, their roots grew thirsty and drank up more water. Their stalks grew strong and tall, and Asta's thorns grew smaller and smaller. Passing bees often stopped and gathered nectar to make sweet honey. And the shadows came, and the rains fell, and the winds blew. And as Asta and Rose rocked back and forth together, they discovered something wonderful. They had both grown high above the surrounding thorns, and their petals were not hurt. Other flowers took note and began to grow out their own petals. Flowers of many shapes and colors appeared in every direction. The miracle of life had begun. The air turned sweet with fragrance and the flower patch became a glorious and joyful place to live. As the flowers discovered how wonderful it feels to grow and bloom, their thorns faded slowly away. Some flowers refused to change, these remained small and stunted and were left behind as others shot upward toward the sun. And the shadows came, and the rains fell, and the winds blew. And the flowers danced.